Welcome back to another production of Swordmaster Publications. My name is Ernie Lawrence. We're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm watching a lot of YouTube guys doing something similar to what I'm doing. Probably going to add things over the course of this book and several others as we go along. I'm learning as I go. One of those things is I have realized that I never introduce myself when I do these videos, and some of you may be curious as to who I am. Some of you, I know a lot of you already know who I am because we're either related or friends or whatever, and I appreciate your support this whole time. But as more and more people watch these, a lot of you are going to wonder who this guy is that's talking here. So I'm going to try to remember to introduce my videos by giving you my name and my company. So there's that. We're starting into the book of Deuteronomy tonight, and we're going to just do Deuteronomy chapter 1. And there's a lot of Moses recounting what's going on, because they're right there before Jordan, before Jericho. A number of things have happened between the end of Numbers and the beginning of Deuteronomy here. Some people have been slain and taken out. And so Moses is recounting that, but he's kind of go back and remind this second generation, because remember, the first generation that came out of Egypt, at least the men are all dead of that generation that were 20 years old and older. That happened in Numbers 14, which we're going to refer to tonight. And so this is a second generation that is about to go in to the land of Canaan and begin to conquer it. So anyway, that's what chapter 1 is about. That's what chapter 2 is about. And we're going to learn some interesting things here, because Deuteronomy, while it is recounting some things, because of its perspective looking back, we are going to get a lot more details. Deuteronomy has a lot more details that will fill in the other books that we've already read, starting about mid-Exodus, when they're leaving Egypt, all the way through. Of course, Leviticus came first, but it covers all of the laws and the tabernacle and all that. And then all the way through the book of Numbers that we've just finished up. So it's an interesting book, because Deuteronomy not only gives us the laws for the people, but it also puts it in a lot of things into a much stronger context. And so as we go back through, I'll be pointing out where these things refer to, whether they refer back to the Old Testament places that we've already read or forward, so that we can reference those. All right, so let's begin in Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 1. These be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel on this side of Jordan in the wilderness. So they haven't crossed the Jordan. Moses doesn't get to, because of his disobedience. And they're in the plain over against the Red Sea, between Paran and Tophel and Laban and Hazeroth and Dizahab. Okay, so they're over against the Red Sea. Well, what Red Sea are they over against? See, this is one of those things, and I guess I should have pulled this up. I've talked about this before, and again, I'm not great with geography. Geography is easily my worst subject, but okay, here we go. But I want to kind of deal with this. So here's Goshen up here. This is the land of Goshen. You can see where it's beautiful and green. This is where the Israelites were at. And for them to come straight down and across the Red Sea makes no sense. And the way that it talks about in Exodus, this is where the Philistines were, is they traveled out of Goshen and had to go south to avoid the Philistines. And so they would have crossed here the 25 days after they left Egypt and crossed the Red Sea here. Because this is actually the Red Sea. This whole little, you see here the Red Sea. And so the crossing of the Red Sea was, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I'm studying it, I'm trying to confirm it, but as far as I have right now, this is just think of it as a hypothesis, but they probably crossed about right here. And so when Moses is talking, when we talk about Mount Sinai and all that, these guys are out here. One of the mountains in this area is going to be Sinai, not this one, which a lot of people say this Mount Sinai is kind of down here in the tip somewhere, but over here is going to be where Mount Sinai is, and the wilderness that they wander in is out here. And we don't have a really good idea where these places are that they went to, but we do have some references because we have Red Sea, we have Jordan, and so the Jordan River, and you can kind of see, well, I don't guess they have it marked on this one, but this is the Dead Sea, the Salt Sea is what they call it, and then here's the Sea of Galilee, and the Jordan River, let's see, does it even... Yeah, you can see little green patches here yeah, here's the Jordan. The Jordan River is this river that kind of squiggles along or whatever. So when we talk about where they're at, this is the Red Sea that they're by, not this over here. Moses isn't talking to them over here. They were still fleeing from the Egyptians at this point because the Egyptians were chasing them this way. And you know, as they came down here and they crossed the Red Sea, this is the most likely place in my understanding, my hypothesis. And so he's talking to them, and these are things that he said to them by the Red Sea, and then on up into what we call Jordan. And again, we can talk about, and we've seen maps where you've got Reuben and Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh on this side, and then this is Israel and its divided lands on this side. And we talked about this being the river of Egypt, not this and not the Nile, but this being the river of Egypt. Here there was a river here that is their land. So a lot of people will try to say, well, all of this belongs to Israel and God never fulfilled that land promise, and that's not true at all. God declares that the land promise has been fulfilled at the end of Joshua. They've conquered all the things that they're supposed to conquer. So anyway, we'll cover that when we get to it, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea geography wise that when we talk about the thing Moses is talking about on this side of the Jordan, and he's talking about all of these things in the plain that touches the Red Sea. That plain goes all the way down and touches the Red Sea over here. So they're in this plain, and it goes all the way down to this area here. That's the plain that they're talking about, what we think of now as Jordan, the country of Jordan. Okay? So it says there are 11 days journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea. So 11 days journey as far as a 2 million people camp can travel, which is not very far. And then it says, and it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spake unto the children of Israel according to all that Jehovah had given him in commandment unto them. So Moses is basically going to recount everything since they left Egypt. And we are in the 40th year. Remember, he said that it's the 40th year since they left Egypt. Now, remember, they spent 1 year before we get to Numbers 13 and the spies go in. So this is the end of what we would think of as the 39 years of wandering, because they've got some other things to do. And in the 11th month on the first, and I think that's right. I might have to correct that, because we're coming to the end of essentially the 41st year. Yeah, that would be right. Since they left Egypt. Okay, so they're on the first day of the month that Moses spake unto the children. So he's going to recount everything. Moses is about to die. And so he's kind of giving them one last long speech here that gets written down. And it's Moses speaking, but it's most likely Joshua who is kind of taking dictation and writing all of this down as Moses speaks, because we know that at the end of this book, Moses' death, or his disappearance, God takes him, that is written about. Well, Moses isn't going to write about that I guess he could, but it's most likely the way that it's written, Joshua is the one that's taking dictation of all of this. So these are Moses, they're Moses' words, but just like Paul, think about Paul, when Paul wrote letters, Paul didn't actually do the writing. He had somebody else do the physical writing, even though he's the one that's dictating what the letter would say. because a lot of people believe he had bad eyesight or whatever, and then he would sign at the end with his own handwriting. So we have a similar situation here. No big deal. There's nothing wrong with saying that this is Moses' writing, because it is. All right. So here's some things that we read about that have happened since the book of Numbers. After he had slain, according to all that Jehovah had given him in commandment unto them, after he had slain, and this is that he is Jehovah, after he had slain Sihon the king of the Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan. So remember, they were talking about Manasseh. Half of Manasseh gets the land of Bashan. Okay, because Reuben and Gad were like, hey, we want to be on this side. And Moses said, okay, that's fine, but you got to go into battle first. Oh, and Manasseh's going to get half of Manasseh's going to get Bashan. Now they actually have accomplished that. Sihon's dead, who was the king of the Amorites, and then Og, the king of Bashan, is now dead, which dwelt at Ashtaroth in Edrei. And Ashtaroth is an interesting name because Ashtaroth is actually the name of one of their pagan gods. Ashtoreth is the pagan god. She was a pagan goddess of virility and war, which is really weird to go together, like at least for me. But she morphed into Eoster, and she has kind of a reflection in Ishtar, and eventually Easter in the Roman pantheon. And so, and that's where the name Easter comes from for today. So a little bit of studying there. But anyway, Ashtaroth, there's a relationship there to Easter. But so Og, king of Bashan, dwells in Ashtaroth in Edrei, and he's dead. And he's interesting because we're going to talk about him. He's a giant, and he had a huge bed, and we get to read about that later on. So it says, on this side of Jordan in the land of Moab began Moses to declare this law, saying, Jehovah our God spake unto us in Horeb, saying, you have dwelt long enough in this mount. Turn you, and Horeb, I believe, is Sinai. They stayed there. Remember, they stayed there for a year at Sinai, and I believe Horeb is the same thing as Sinai. But remember, everything has multiple names. Remember, Jethro was also called Reuel, and I think he had one other name. And so don't get confused here. This you've dwelt long enough at this mountain. This year that they spent at Sinai, this is also Horeb. There's no contradiction here. It's just things have multiple names. Paul, Saul, that kind of thing. So it says, turn you and take your journey and go to the mount of the Amorites and unto all the high the places nigh thereunto, in the plain and the hills and in the vale and in the south, and by the seaside, to the land of the Canaanites, and unto Lebanon, unto the great river, the river Euphrates, which is way in the north. Okay, so they were going to the land, the promised land, is what God tells them to do. Go that direction. And then God says, behold, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land which Jehovah sware unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give unto them and to their seed after them. And Moses says, I spake unto you at that time. Okay, so this is at the time. He's like, hey, during this time period, I am not able to bear you myself alone. Now, here's an interesting thing. This is actually in Exodus 18. Jethro's come down to talk to him and hang out for a little while, and they're actually in. Remember, this is the time at Mount Sinai when Moses is getting all this. Well, go back to Exodus. What happened in Exodus? That's when he goes up to Mount Sinai and is there for a while. And so this is one of the reasons that I think that Exodus was written after Leviticus, was because of the way that it records these things. And so Moses, here, I spake to you at that time, and he's talking about what happened in Exodus 18. He's saying, I'm not able to bear you myself alone. And Jehovah your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are this day as the stars of heaven for multitude. So, when was this promise made? Genesis 15:5. What does God say to Abraham? And God brought him forth abroad and said, look now toward heaven and tell the stars if you be able to number them. And he said unto him, so shall thy seed be. Now here's an interesting thing. God specifically says, look to heaven and count the stars. So if you look up in the night sky and if you try to count the stars, you're not going to count all that many. If we use our advanced scientific knowledge and our math and our telescopes and all the things that we have, we know that the number of stars up in space is enormous. We're talking like, I think it's something on the order of like 19, 20 zeros at the end of it. But just looking up with the naked eye, in fact, that's actually a good question. It's one of those things I should have looked up beforehand. How many stars can you see with the unaided eye? There we go. Let's just, how many stars can you see? 5,000 stars. Okay? So that's kind of a silly number when you think about it. But even granting, let's say we're looking up at the Milky Way and we're counting the Milky Way there as stars. Okay? Of the ones that we can actually see, a couple of million is actually right within that zone. And so it makes sense for him to say, look up to heaven and look at the stars. And of course we're getting the idea here of just I don't want to say hyperbole, that's not the right word, but he's not setting up an equation here. He's saying, look it up and see all the stars. When you look up, there's thousands of stars. And so he says, Abraham, your seed, all of your descendants is going to be like this. And that's the promise that he gives him. But the important part is, it's fulfilled. Moses declares that it's fulfilled right before they send the spies in, or actually right when he is having to deal with, he's exhausted because he's having to deal with all of these people and he's trying to do it all himself. And Jethro says, why are you doing that? Why don't you pick out some guys that are trustworthy and you can set them over thousands and hundreds and tens and whatever, and the lesser things can be judged by the tens, and then as it gets more important, you can move up the ranks, kind of like our own judicial system, and then the most important things can come directly to Moses. And so Moses declares at that time, you are this day as the stars of heaven for multitude. So promise fulfilled to Abraham. And it was fulfilled before they ever reached the land of promise. Okay? Verse 11, Jehovah God of your fathers make you 1,000 times so many more as you are. Now again, that's not, that word 1,000 there is not an equation. This is a figure of speech. Okay? If we were to take 2 million and multiply it by 1,000, that would be 2 billion, which is approximately 2/7 the whole population of the earth right now. We're not talking, this is not an equation. These are figures of speech for them to, for Moses to say, think about the idea of 1,000. It's a way of saying many times more. If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. Did you really tell them 1,000 times? No, it's a figure of speech. That's the same kind of thing that's going on here. Moses is just saying, God made you this day as the stars of heaven. May he bless you so that you are even bigger. And that's all he's saying here. So 1,000 times so many more as you are, and bless you as he has promised you. How can I myself alone bear your cumbrance and your burden and your strife? So there's too many people for him to be the judge over all of them. Take you wise men and understanding and known among your tribes, and I will make them rulers over you. And you answered me and said, the thing which you have spoken is good for us to do. So the people agreed, hey, that's a good idea, Moses. So I took the chief of your tribes, wise men and known, and made them heads over you. Now it's important. They were wise men. They were able to make good decisions. They were known to the people. These aren't obscure people that were friends with Moses and didn't really know the people, but it was taken out of the people, and they were well known by them. So they related to them. So when we talk about politicians and we talk about people who we set in governance over ourselves, they need to be known by the people. And this is why local government is so much more important, is we can relate to those people. The bigger the government gets, the further away it gets from us. We never shook hands with Donald Trump or Joe Biden or George Bush or any of those people. We don't know those people, and they don't know us. We know of them, but we don't know them. But this past election, I went out and I actually met all of the members of or the people who were running for city council. I actually met those people, shook hands with them, had conversations with them. 2 of them I actually made friends with, and I have their phone numbers, and we actually talk back and forth even after the election. I've called and talked to them, and I know them. And this is an important thing here. I don't want to gloss over it and just kind of read the verse, but I want you to understand that Moses is saying that these men were known to them, and so there's a connection there. This is why we have juries set up the way that we do. So it's a jury of peers, people that should know you, and that way they can judge accurately and correctly. You're not going to have just some random stranger come in and say, I don't know anything about this person, and I want to be just cold and distant or whatever. You don't want an official or somebody that is so far removed from you that they can't relate to you and understand you. But a jury of your peers, these are everyday people just like you are, and they're not trained. They're not like, they don't hold a special office or something of jury. It's not an elected place. It's very hard to corrupt them if the process works right. And so that's the idea of being known. I really wanted to highlight that because it's such an important part of what Moses did here. All right. So it took wise men and known and made them heads over you, captains over thousands, captains over hundreds, captains over 50s, and captains over 10s, and officers among your tribes. Now, note, the word captain here and officers, these are civil offices. These aren't necessarily military, although they probably doubled in that role, because this is essentially a moving army that's going through the wilderness or whatever. But these are judges and rulers that are over all the people, and they're handling civil cases. They're handling the theocracy that was the Israelite nation. Okay, and so here he's going to call them judges, and I charged your judges at that time. So these captains and these officers act as judges. I charged your judges at that time, saying, hear the causes between your brethren and judge. So they were brethren. Good way to look at the people that we sit in judge or jury over, depending on what position you hold. And judge righteously between every man and his brother and the stranger that is with him. Okay? So judge righteously. That's a command. Are we supposed to judge? The Bible says don't judge. The Bible says don't judge. Matthew 7:1. It's one of the most abused verses in the entire Bible. The Bible commands us to judge. In fact, it is impossible for you to not judge somebody on things that are of moral importance or even of any kind of significance at all. You can't go. In fact, the very person who condemns you for judging is judging you, and it's a self-defeating argument. Matthew 7, if you look at it properly, just real quick, Matthew 7 is teaching you not to judge hypocritically, because it goes on to say, why are you judging your brother for a little small matter, the speck in his eye, when you've got a whole log in your eye? You're a hypocrite. Don't do that. That's what it says. But John 7:24 says, judge righteous judgment, not according to appearance. And so that's what Moses is saying here. Judge righteously. Judge objectively. Judge according to the law, not based on bias or preference or you can see here a respective person. Okay, so that's the way they were supposed to judge. Between every man and his brother and the stranger. So their law even applied to foreigners. When foreigners came in, the foreigners were subject to their law, and they were supposed to judge them righteously. Don't look at the foreigner and say, well, he's a foreigner, we can be more harsh with him. No, God says judge righteously, because if you don't, you're basically lying, and God hates lying. So the stranger that is with them is supposed to be judged just as righteously as all of the Israelites. And then Moses went on to say, remember, he's talking back in Exodus 18 here, you shall not respect persons in judgment. Okay, you shall not respect persons in judgment. Is God a respecter of persons? The Bible says over and over and over again, God is not a respecter of persons. He has no bias towards anybody. Sorry, Calvinist, you're flat wrong on the whole election thing. God does not show respect towards persons. Your doctrine falls so flat, it's not even funny. And the same thing is happening here in the judgment that God is commanding through Moses to do. He's telling the people, don't have respect for person. James 2 does the same thing. Do not judge with respect of persons. Don't have bias or prejudice against people. I like that person, so I'm going to judge them easy, and I don't like that person, so I'm going to judge them harshly. Or that person's rich and they might give me something, so I'm going to judge them nice. You know, we do this in our justice system. My wife was just watching the O.J. Simpson dramatization, and one of the things that happens to a lot of our celebrities or our politicians is when they enter into the justice system, they get a slap on the wrist, or the rest of us, we might get a book thrown at us. And that's not right. That's being a respecter of person, and it's not just. It's absolutely unjust for them to, not that we should judge them harsher because they're celebrity, and we don't want to, we don't want to swing the pendulum the other way. We just want to have objective rules that everybody has to follow. Especially America is supposed to be a nation of laws. Everybody should be the same under the law, from the poorest to the richest, from the school teacher to the politician in Washington. Everybody should be under the same laws. And when that doesn't happen, when you have respect of persons like this, everything's going to start to unravel. And we see that happening right now. I'm just going to be blunt about it. That's what we're seeing right now. So anyway, you shall not respect persons in judgment. Why? God doesn't do that. But you shall hear the small as well as the great. All right? So there's two classes of people there, small, great, and everybody in between. You shall not be afraid of the face of man, for the judgment is God's. In other words, don't fear what man's going to do to you. Don't fear a retribution. Don't fear to judge righteously. Don't fear to do what's right. But understand that this is actually God's judgment. If you're judging righteously, if you're judging objectively, if you're following the law, then this is actually God that's doing the judging. And that's super, super important. We see this again in Romans 13, where the king does not bear the sword in vain. All of that kind of judgment is ultimately coming from God, because he is the source of truth. He is the source of objective truth and judgment and righteousness. So and then Moses goes on to say, after telling all this to the judges, he says, if the cause is too hard for you, then bring it unto me, and I will hear it. So Moses was kind of the supreme court. And then he says, and again, this is what he's recounting what he told them. He said, and I commanded you at that time. Okay, that's back then, not now. I commanded you at that time all things which you should do. So what, in that year that they were there at Sinai, Moses is recounting, hey, this is all the stuff that I commanded you. So where does Deuteronomy come from? Deuteronomy was written on the west side of Jordan right before they go into the promised land. But it's a reminder of things that Moses told them. He says that he's going to be the primary judge, the Supreme Court. And then he says, I commanded you at that time all the things which you should do. That is the commandments that we're going to read about. But they got these commandments back in the time of Exodus, when they were around Sinai, when they dwelt there for about a year. Again, when Moses goes up into the mountain, he doesn't get 10 commandments. When Moses goes up into the mountain, he gets all 600 something of them. And so this is the thing that he comes back down and tells them. So all these people that are saying, 10 commandments, 10 commandments, they're not reading it right. They're not understanding the Old Testament right. It wasn't 10 commandments that he brought down on those tablets. Okay? So then he says, and when we departed from Horeb, we went through all that great and terrible wilderness, which you saw by the way of the mountain of the Amorites, as Jehovah our God commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. Okay, so this is going from Sinai, from Horeb, up the kind of the backside of the boot of Saudi Arabia to Kadesh Barnea. And he said, Moses says, and I said unto you, you are coming to the mountain of the Amorites. So there's this mountain that's kind of overlooking the southern part of the land of Jordan. I mean, the land of Israel, the promised land at that time. And he says, you're coming to the mountain of the Amorites, which Jehovah our God does give unto us. Behold, Jehovah your God has set the land before you. Go up and possess it, as Jehovah God of thy fathers has said unto thee. Fear not, neither be discouraged. So they're like, let's go up and take the land. This is after a year of being at Horeb. And they come up and they're right on the southern part of the promised land, ready to walk in and take it. And you came near unto me, every one of you, and said, we will send men before us, and they shall search us out the land and bring us word again by what way we must go up and into what cities we shall come. And so the people came to Moses and said, hey, let's send us some spies. And the saying pleased me well, and I took 12 men of you, one of a tribe. So Moses took one man from each tribe, did not send a Levite. Again, when we talk 12 men, we're talking about the 12 non-Levitical tribes here, including Ephraim and Manasseh. And everything is good, doing what they should have been doing. Again, we see this in Numbers 13. And even when they come back and report in Numbers 14 for a little bit, everything is great. And then it gets to the end, and things go south. And they turned and they went up into the mountain and came into the valley of Eshcol and searched it out. And they took of the fruit of the land in their hands and they brought it down unto us. Remember, they went all the way up to the north and came all the way back down, got into the valley of Eshcol, brought some fruit out, and brought it down to us and brought word again and said, it is a good land which Jehovah our God does give us. Because remember, their report was great at the beginning. Notwithstanding, you would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of Jehovah your God. They rebelled against God. They were fearful. They said there's giants there. They were just really not trusting in God. Even after all the wonderful things that he had done for them, they did not trust in God. And they rebelled against him. And you murmured in your tents, and you said, because Jehovah hated us, he had brought us forth out of the land of Egypt. And I remember they whined about that a lot. Now remember, this was a past generation. This is not this generation that Moses is actually talking to here on this side of Jordan. This was their parents. So he's basically saying, this is what your parents said. To deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us. Yes, God went to all the trouble of removing you from slavery to make you wander for 1 year, provided everything for you just to bring you into a land of giants to kill you there. That makes every sense in the world. No, it doesn't. That's dumb. These people not thinking straight. Okay? And so they said, whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people is greater and taller than we. So, lower center of gravity. I played football. Being tall is not all it's cracked up to be. The cities are great and walled up to heaven. Okay? You have a God that's living and all-powerful. And moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakims there. Remember, they were worried about the giants. Then I said unto you, dread not, neither be afraid of them. Jehovah your God, which goes before you, he shall fight for you, according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes. Remember, Moses is like, guys, why are you afraid? Remember all the stuff that Jehovah did to bring you out of Egypt? There's the whole parting of a whole sea there that he did. The 10 plagues, the whole pillar of fire and pillar of cloud and all of that. Are you forgetting all that God did? And apparently they did, because they were afraid. All right. And he says, and in the wilderness, where thou hast seen how Jehovah God bare thee as a man doth bear his son, and all the way that you went until you came to this place. So he's saying, God took care of you the way that a father takes care of his son. He watched over you, he provided for you, he protected you, he did all the things that a father would do for his son while you were in the wilderness for a year there at Mount Sinai, and then marching up to Kadesh Barnea. Why do you think God is going to destroy you at this point in time? That makes no sense. That's what Moses is saying right now. Yet in this thing you did not believe Jehovah your God. And again, Moses is speaking. He's reminding the children of how their parents were acting. So even though he's saying you did this, he's actually talking about their parents. Who went in the way before you to search you out a place to pitch your tents in, and fire by night to show you by what way you should go, and in a cloud by day. Now notice this. You did not believe who? Jehovah your God. Okay, that word there is Jehovah, Yahweh, in the Hebrew. That's who it's talking about. Who is this? Yahweh, Jehovah, who went before you. Okay, he went before them in fire by night and in cloud by day. Okay, so this is God who was fire by night and cloud by day. We're talking about God here. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 4. Talking about Moses, and we're all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So water above, water on either side. Who was the cloud? God. Did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them. How did that rock follow them? As a cloud and as fire. And that rock was Christ. Absolutely proof that Jesus Christ is God. Because Deuteronomy says that God followed them as fire and cloud. Paul claims that God is Jesus Christ. God the Son. So, I mean, how many proofs do you need? There's a lot of people out there, Jesus is not God. You're wrong. You're just flat wrong. Okay? Verse 34, and Jehovah heard the voice of your words and was wroth. And swear, wroth means he was full of wrath. He was wroth and swear, saying, surely there shall not one of these men of this evil generation. Woo, we see this a lot. An evil generation. What does Peter say in Acts 2? Save yourselves from this untoward generation, this evil generation. This generation shall not pass. There's a lot of things said about that generation. Well, what's a generation? 40 years. Surely there shall not one of these men of this evil generation see the good land which I swear to give unto your fathers. Save, in other words, other than Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he shall see it. Why? Because Caleb came and gave a good report and said, let's go. God can do it. Let's get it. He shall see it, and to him will I give the land that he hath trodden upon, and to his children, because he hath wholly followed Jehovah. There was no fear. There was no hesitation. Everything was, God's going to do it for us. We trust God. We have faith in God. Caleb was ready to go, and Joshua was right there by his side. And so God says, everybody 20 years and older, at least of the men specifically, they're going to drop dead in the wilderness. You're going to wander for 40 days. The spies went in. For every day they went in, you get to wander for 1 year, until all of the people of this generation, this evil, rebellious generation, drops dead in the wilderness, except for Caleb and except for Joshua. Also Jehovah was angry with me for your sake, saying, you shall not go in thither. So what is Moses saying here? And he's not blaming them for his own personal sin. What Moses is saying is that because of your rebellion, I grew frustrated with you, and I sinned, and so I don't get to go in either. That's essentially what I'm drawing from this. He's not lying, he's not trying to shift blame or whatever, but he said, and Jehovah was angry with me, that for your sakes, he's saying that because of you doing what you did. And Moses is saying, that's why I struck the rock instead of speaking to it. I disobeyed God. I don't get to go in either, because God was mad at me. And Moses doesn't get to go in as well. But Joshua the son of Nun, which stands before thee, he shall go in thither. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. So Caleb gets to go in. Caleb he's got his part. But Joshua, who's been the right hand, kind of the assistant for Moses for these past 41 years, Joshua is going to go in, and he is going to cause Israel to inherit it. How is it really Joshua? No, it's God. But God working through Joshua. Joshua's going to be kind of the commander-in-chief. He's going to be the shepherd, the great shepherd that Moses was, the leader of the people, not a king, but more like a super judge, if you will, because we go Joshua and then the book of Judges. So all of those judges follow after kind of the way Joshua does. But he's not a king. He doesn't rule and act like a king. But Joshua was going to be the instrument through which God would cause Israel to inherit the promised land. And then he says, moreover, your little ones. So now Moses is talking to these little ones who've all grown up, but he's talking about what he said to the Israelite people. Moreover, your little ones, which you said would be a prey, and your children, which in that day had no knowledge between good and evil, they shall go in thither, and unto them will I give it, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn you and take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Now, did they go back across the Red Sea? Are they journeying back over towards Egypt? Or are we talking about they're on the far eastern side across that second fork, and they're in kind of like the backside of the boot of Saudi Arabia? That's what I believe. That's my hypothesis. So they were going all up and down in that area in Saudi Arabia for 40 years. Okay? Now, there's a point to make here in terms of how God, through Moses, is speaking to these people. He's actually talking to them as if they were their parents, and he's trying to get them to understand that Israel carries forward the sins, not the guilt, but the consequences of the sins of their fathers. What does Jesus say in Matthew 23? You are guilty of all of the sins from Abel. There weren't even any Jews. There was no Israelites, but they contain the guilt, they carry the consequences of the slaying of all of these prophets and these people of God, all the way back to the very, very beginning, to the first murder. And so Moses is trying to impress upon them, he's talking to them as if they were their parents, to get them to understand the importance of don't act like your parents. And so that's the way he presents this thing, because he's not talking to those people. They're dead. They died in the 40 years of wandering. Only their children remain. But the way he's talking to them is as if they were their parents. So he says, but as for you, oh wait, I already did that. Verse 41, then you answered and said unto me. So did the children actually say this? No, their parents did. Then you answered and said unto me, we have sinned against Jehovah, we will go up and fight. So the children weren't going to go up and fight, but their parents wanted to, we were wrong, we should trust God. So we're going to go up and fight according to all that Jehovah our God has commanded us. So they learned the lesson, but now it was too late because God had already cursed them. And said, when you had girded on every man his weapon of war, you were ready to go up into the hill. Well, again, it wasn't the people that he's actually talking to here in Deuteronomy. It's their parents. But he's speaking to them as a nation. He's speaking to them as a kind of a corporate entity here. And Jehovah said unto me, say unto them, go not up, neither fight, for I am not among you, lest you be smitten before your enemies. So God says, hey, they don't need to go do that, because I'm not going to help them. And they're going to lose. And so Moses speaks unto the Israelites and says, you would not hear, but rebelled against the commandment of Jehovah again. Second time. They didn't learn a lesson. God says, spy out the land, go in and take it. They were afraid, said, no, we can't take it. God says, okay, fine, you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because you didn't believe in me. Oh, no, we'll go take it now. God says, no, don't go up and take it, because I'm not going to be with you now, because you rebelled against me. Well, they did it anyway, so they rebelled twice. Didn't learn their lesson. Stubborn people. And they went presumptuously up into the hill, and the Amorites which dwelt in that mountain came out against you and chased you as bees do. Like, they just harried them, and it was awful. They lost, men died, and they destroyed you in Seir, even unto Horeb. And so because of their rebellion, they lost. God was not with them. It was a complete rout. And you returned and wept before Jehovah, but Jehovah would not hearken to your voice, nor give ear unto you. Okay? Listen to what this says. Moses tells them, you returned and you wept, but God would not hear your voice. How many times do people who are rebellious to God and God gives them over to their sin, he allows them, and we see this with Pharaoh, a great example, and we're going to see this again in the second chapter when we get to that video. But how many times does God talk about the hardening of people's hearts? How many opportunities did God give to Pharaoh, and every time Pharaoh hardened his heart? Now it says that there are places where it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but nobody ever wants to talk about the mechanics. How did God harden Pharaoh's heart? God hardened Pharaoh's heart by sending the plagues, knowing that Pharaoh was prideful, knowing that Pharaoh had a kingdom to run, and he was up against this supernatural to prove who was superior. And if he relented and gave in, Pharaoh felt that he would have been giving in to another deity that was not of his people, and he felt that he would lose power in their eyes. And so every time God sent a plague and said, look, here's a lesson, let my people go, Pharaoh said, nope, I'm not going to let him go. God gave him 9 chances. And even after the 10th time, Pharaoh still changed his mind, hardened his heart, went after him, and then lost his army on top of that. These people had rebelled against God. They had whined. The Egyptians are coming after us. We should have stayed in Egypt. God parts the Red Sea. They cross. Dry land, wipes out the army. And then they get out there in the wilderness. Oh, we're going to go hungry. God gives them manna. Well, we don't have any water. God gives them water. God provides everything for them. Then he brings them up, says, go conquer the land. Oh, we can't do it because giants. Fine, wander for 40 years. Oh, no, we're going to go do it. Don't do it. They did it anyway. Time and time again, they rebelled against God. God finally got to the point where he was like, you need to learn the lesson. And he stops listening to them. He doesn't listen to them anymore. And people can do that. They can become, by nature, the children of wrath. We read that in the letters that Paul writes about the stubbornness of the Israelites. We read it in Romans, we read it in 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. There's just all over. Hebrews, not that Paul wrote Hebrews, I don't know who wrote it, but it's in there. It talks about their stubbornness. And eventually God gives them over to that so that they can learn their lesson. Did they learn their lesson? Here we are, east side of Jordan, ready to go in and conquer. The children are ready. In fact, they're so ready that when Gad and Reuben come in and say, hey, we like this land over here, Moses says, what, are you going to be like your parents were? No. We're going to go in the front of the vanguard. We're going to be the first guys into battle, and we're going to fight until everybody has their land. They were that confident, because they were leaving their wives and their children and all of their stuff over on the other side of Jordan until the whole campaign was done. Could have taken years. Nope, we're going to go on the front. That's how much confidence this generation had in God. Totally different than the generation before. And we're going to see that in Joshua. But that's the difference of God giving them over to their stubbornness and letting them essentially collapse in the wilderness because of their sin. All of these people that he's talking about here, God's not listening to them. They all died in the wilderness. Joshua and Caleb, the only 2 that survived. Of course, Moses survives, but he didn't get to go in either. And then it says, so you abode in Kadesh many days, according unto the days that you abode there. That's Moses recounting all the way up until the rebellion in Numbers 14. We're going to continue this in Deuteronomy 2. He's going to keep reminding them, and then he's going to remind them of the laws and their responsibilities. Deuteronomy is their duty, the things that the people were supposed to do. Leviticus was more about the priesthood and the duties of the priesthood. Levi, Leviticus. Deuteronomy is about the duty of the people and the laws that the people heard after Moses came down from Mount Sinai. And that's what this book is about. But it's also a reminder of all of the things that the Israelites had done up to this point as it relates to those laws. So that's the introduction to the book of Deuteronomy. Thank you for subscribing. Again, my name is Ernie Lawrence, and this is a production of Swordmaster Publications. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, or if you know how to contact me in a more personal way and you would like to do that, please do so. I'm always happy to chat Bible. Subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications if you want to get when I post up new stuff, which I try to do fairly regularly. But I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to more studies in the book of Deuteronomy. Y'all have a good night.